Welcome to the RJLT Economics. Today, I want to discuss personal freedom vis-a-vis corporate freedom, along the lines of classic liberalism versus new liberalism. And I want to point out at the end of today's podcast that unrestrained capitalism is not conducive to lasting freedom, to lasting personal freedom. To begin with, I want to just cover very briefly why I have the idea to discuss today's topic. And I think that that has to be the attempts by all sorts of players from different, different backgrounds with different motivations, incentives to obfuscate the idea of freedom, right? From some of the right, more conservative voices, when they want to talk about freedom, they talk in the beginning. They correctly criticize the new politically correct social police type of social police warriors or whatever, who are just out there to censor people of their freedom and to take away their freedom of expression. That is correct, right? I support that effort, but at the same time, they cannot resist to talk about how corporations will have freedom to do this and that. Well, that's the second part is not really the same as the first part, because personal freedom is not the same as corporate freedom. On the other hand, a lot of the left-wing people love to talk about, they say that they love freedom too, but they say that they do not support unrestrained capitalism, which I think it's correct. I agree with that point of view. But at the same time, they say, hey, that person has some arsenic view that I don't like. And I think we think that this person should be taken off, should be deplatformed from certain whatever media software or any ways of expressing their ideas. In essence, these people are social warriors. They want to censor other people. Now, I disagree with this group of people too. What I want to say in today's podcast is if there is anything that my listeners can take away, is that personal freedom and corporate freedom are two separate things, and neither is absolute. But personal freedom, in my opinion, from my point of view, it's something that we should treasure, whereas corporate freedom is something that should be put in a lower priority, lower tier of priority. Is less important from an ideological perspective. But as I will also discuss, corporate freedom is kind of also valuable. It's not that corporations should be heavily regulated because then you can also lose economic development, which can also harm in turn personal freedom. Let me just go into these in a little bit more depth here. So first of all, let's discuss a little bit the issue of personal freedom. From my point of view, personal freedom is really it's a humanist idea. It comes from I think, it's really a natural pursuit to explore life, and I think this is something that is inherent to human DNA. It is curiosity, right? People want to explore things, and based on this, over time, a lot of the thought leaders, philosophers, gradually developed the idea that there are certain rights that are inalienable from the individual. And these rights include, of course, the rights to life, the right to think for themselves, and from this point of view of personal freedom, of course, also the rights to express oneself. And of course, there are, in a capitalist system, also the rights to personal property, to private property. Now, these are, apart from the last one, in terms of personal property, these are humanist ideas. And these are really about how an individual interacts with the surroundings and with the society at large. It is about a person's ability to make personal choices for themselves, right? What kind of knowledge that they want to acquire, what kind of experience that they want to go through, and where they want to live, or what kind of food they want to eat, and whether they want to take certain medical procedures or not. These are personal choices, and it's an integral part of a person's freedom. And at the same time, in order to have these abilities to make free choices, a person needs to have the ability to think for himself. Now, there are a lot of reactionary, repressive autocrats who are deeply offended by a free thinking population. I think this is, of course, never sustainable. You never see a heavily censoring, heavily repressive, heavily reactionary regime last long. It will always be chased out because, in my judgment, just from the view from an evolutionary perspective, humans, and in fact a lot of the animals, are endowed with curiosity, and people want to think. If a regime, a system, a society wants to tell the person what to think and nothing else, then there will always be a lot of social problems that over time cannot be well controlled by force, and it will just the society can collapse as a result. So I think to varying degrees, the freedom to think for oneself is very important, and it is also inalienable from a person's freedom, personal freedom. And lastly, not really lastly, but also very, very important, thirdly, there is also the freedom to express oneself. This, of course, is less absolute, right? You can never tell, in my judgment, you can never tell a person not to think in certain ways. Even if you do, you will never succeed over time. But it is possible for you to succeed in censoring or you stopping or preventing certain types of expressions. And these expressions, it depends on how much control you want to exert, right? It could be you don't want people to express certain political ideas or certain social ideas. And then it could be because you don't want people to express certain scientific ideas or ideas about their experience of nature. And this is just varying degrees of control in speech. And before you think about people, the absurdity in attempting to stop the speech concerning science, we just need to look at the classic example, which I have mentioned a couple of times, which is Galileo, and of course the sun and the earth, the relationship, right? I don't think we need to talk more in there. I think everyone should have some idea about that. And that is a form of censorship or control of the expression of a scientific fact or scientific opinion, let's say, because science is really less about fact, but more about understanding what may be the fact. So that's about the freedom to express oneself. Now, these things, from the more absolute ones, in my opinion, which is the freedom to think for oneself, and then the freedom to express oneself, and of course, based on the freedom to think and express for oneself, the freedom to make personal choices. These are in varying degrees concerning personal freedom, and a consequence, a price that one should be ready to pay from time to time is the freedom to be wrong. Because when you have the freedom to think for yourself, or when you have the freedom to make your own choices, it is possible, in fact, it is likely that from time to time you will make mistakes and you will regret having made those mistakes. But that is not a good reason, in my judgment, to take freedom away from the individual. Instead, I think we should build systems and institutions that help people to think more constructively, right? So in other words, instead of teaching people, telling people what to think, teach them how to think more constructively. Instead of making the decisions for the people, teach people to make wise, constructive decisions. And of course, instead of censoring and stopping people's freedom to express themselves, teach them how to create teach them and create for them an environment to express their opinions and ideas more constructively. That, I think, is a way to build a society that is based on personal individual freedom. Now let's go to the second thing, which is corporate freedom. On the one hand, I must say that in the current times, over the last maybe 4 decades, there has been an overexpansion of corporate freedom, and I think today there is too much corporate freedom, and that is not a good thing. In fact, it is according to, it approaches what Karl Marx says, that capitalism is, what Karl Marx predicts will be the end of capitalism, which is that a capitalist society, in a unrestrained capitalist society, when there is too much corporate freedom, corporations will destroy their customers, they will destroy their businesses in the pursuit of efficiency and the pursuit of immediate short-term profit. This has happened with the rise of a lot of large corporations, I'm not going to name them, that have taken out small and medium-sized businesses, that have lobbied and changed the regulations to make competition against them impossible. And in fact, they are creating an oligopoly that in the end will lead to their own destruction. So I don't think corporate freedom should be unrestrained. Just like I think to a certain extent personal freedom should not be unrestrained. But I think it is my belief, of course, that personal freedom is more important than corporate freedom. Nevertheless, I do think that certain degrees of corporate freedom is necessary. In particular, I don't think, like currently there is this push for, let's say, electric cars, which is just ridiculous. I think Vladimir Putin puts it very wisely. He said that electric cars are actually powered by coals. And of course, coals are less environmental friendly than oil. But I would put it even further. I would push this even further because electric cars are also powered by all the pollutions, heavy metal pollutions that's associated with mining, with creating, building those batteries. It is really, in my judgment, ridiculous. This sort of push for EVs is absolutely ridiculous. What should be done, I think, is to let the free market find solutions. I think the free market would actually gravitate toward more efficient, more environmentally friendly solutions, such as renewable fuels. It's not like this type of technology doesn't exist. There's hydrogen, right? There's even ethanol. There are a lot of things that can be done with less damage to the environment and achieve real change in helping with the environment. But of course, a lot of the big corporations and big moneyed interests want to have a more dramatic change. They want to push for EVs. That's only because they have captured the political system of several major economies. And these political systems are actually what's driving this push for EV. So in other words, what has happened is that too much corporate freedom has led large corporations, have given the large corporations the freedom to exploit not only their employees, but also their customers. They have allowed large corporations to exploit the system. They have endowed these large corporations with taxpayer money so as to manipulate and reshape the system to redefine the entire business environment to their own advantage. A lot of the investors have, I think a lot of the more senior investors, I guess by senior it really means that they no longer care so much about the repercussions. They have expressed their distrust of the Federal Reserve of the United States and of course of the Treasury, the US Treasury, because their arsenic policies over the last 3-4 decades, from the so-called Greenspan put to all the Bernanke put and whatever, the Powell put, what it really has done is drive up asset prices, empowered corporations, large corporations, at the expense of the working class, of the middle class, of the consumers and of the global South. People need to be really aware that whereas corporate freedom, some degrees of corporate freedom is necessary, right? So as not to over-regulate, we must understand at the same time a lot of these regulations are imposed upon those who are not within the oligopoly. In other words, small and medium-sized companies, by those large corporations, by their lobbyists, in order to have perpetual control of the market. And that, of course, is anti-freedom. It is, but at the same time, I think this is probably a good point for me to really, good segue for me to go to the last point that I want to make, which, if there's anything that you can take away, other than the point that personal freedom and corporate freedom are separate, should be that unrestrained capitalism is not conducive to freedom. And the reason is simple. With unrestrained capitalism, what you get is that corporations will consolidate. Successful ones, more efficient ones, will consolidate and will purchase and will buy out their competition. And small businesses will become bigger businesses, and bigger businesses will be consolidated into the large businesses. And these large businesses with money and market positions, they will, if allowed, go to use essentially bribery, but it could be called lobbying, it could be called protected speech, to influence the system, to reshape the system. And in doing so, they actually create a system that becomes less free for small and medium-sized corporations. And in doing so, they will also take away the personal freedom of the individuals. Because when individual, you see, at first, it is not, they don't take away the personal freedom. We just have to look at the last 30 years, 40 years. Small businesses, medium-sized businesses have been squeezed for all this time, but most of the personal freedom have not been affected. Personal freedom has really become under siege in recent years, just the last 4 or 5 years, right? From, I think, the Alex Jones thing. I think really this is because once once the oligopoly is completely formed, once they have finished the first step of controlling, taking away the corporate freedom, what they want to do of their competitors, and instead only keep their corporate freedom for themselves, they want to take personal freedom from the individuals. So that because the individuals start to see, these big businesses that they are breaking down our community, they are taking jobs away, they are penalizing us, they are profiteering, they are monopolies, etc. All these criticisms are not what they want to hear. And of course, any challenge to these oligarchs is a potential threat to their standing, and that's not to be tolerated. We have seen an accelerated restraining of dissipation of personal freedom in the last few years. And I would guess, I venture to say that if nothing really happens to back this trend, and I don't think there is much to happen that would back this trend. I think there will be, across the world, less personal freedom in the coming decades. That is because the oligarchy has been, the oligopoly has been established, and the only thing that would stop it is a total societal breakdown. And I think if oligopolies are kept as such, because of their siege on personal freedom, eventually this will happen. It is akin, in our most recent memory, to the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. Really, in my personal opinion, I think the Warsaw Pact, the ideal of communism, was not necessarily a bad one. But in order to hold things together, they used methods that are really anti-freedom. They use these methods to control what people can do, what choices people can make, or in fact, what choices that are available to the public. They take away people's freedom to express their ideas, and they try to tell people what to think. But again, this comes back to what I have said, which is that humans, by virtue of evolution, are not meant to be taught how to think, but instead what to think, but instead how to think. People will always have their own ideas, and when their ideas of what is right, and what they have seen of what is true, differs from what they have been taught is right, and what they have been propagandized with as facts. When there is a lot of this dissonance in the society will not be as stable. And when there is an external force upon it, it will crumble. So I think what's going to happen in the short term in the Western so-called quote-unquote liberal democracies is that the oligopoly will continue to encroach upon personal freedom, but that change is coming in, well, if quick, perhaps in a decade, if not, in a few decades. Anyway, so I hope this podcast has been interesting. I hope that you have at least found some ideas that you can agree with. But in any case, I wish you a great day. And of course, if you like this podcast, give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe if you wish to. Thanks, and have a great day.